Welcome to Geography Unit on Unit 1. And in this section we're talking about the geography of the Baltics. And when we speak of the Baltics, it's probably good to take a look at the map. And I have included in your eCampus Unit 1 folder a JPEG map of the Baltic region, or you can pull it up on Google or whatever you prefer. The area that I'm talking about when I discuss the Baltics, and as I said before, these terms are often a bit ambiguous. Today, when we talk about the Baltics in terms of political structure, we'd most likely discuss Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. But looking at it geographically, we're going to be discussing today Estonia, Latvia, and then there's this little tiny exclave of Russia called Kaliningrad, on the Baltic coast, and we'll talk briefly about Lithuania. And again, Lithuania's history is connected very much with Poland and Belarusia or Belarus, and so we'll kind of include that a little bit later. So today we're going to be focusing a lot on the northern areas of the Baltics, if you want to say, or maybe the 2/3 of the Baltics, when we discuss this region of Estonia, Latvia, and Kaliningrad. And when we're talking about the geography of this area, the most important feature of the Baltics is the Baltic Sea. And the Baltic Sea has been a vital source of transportation, information, and communication to this region all the way back into really 3,000 BC. It's been an essential component to this region, really. And the Baltic Sea is quite strange. Because it's restricted at the Danish Straits as it comes in from the North Sea, it is restricted in tides. For example, there's generally no tides in the Baltic Sea, and it's brackish. And what I mean by brackish, I mean that it doesn't have the same salt content of the open sea, and as a matter of fact, most of it is about 1/5 of the salt content of the open sea. And the result of this is that the further you get away from the Danish Straits, the closer you get to areas like St. Petersburg, and the farthest points really in the east, you find that this area freezes over. And this becomes a major problem for the burgeoning Russian Empire in the 19th century, and it's just a general problem as well to this area. Because of global warming, the preponderancy of this sea freezing over in the northern areas near the Gulf of Finland and the Livonian Bay has decreased. But when I lived in Estonia a few years ago, the first year I was there, it was an exceptionally cold winter, and the sea froze over, and it freezes over so much that depending on certain times, that there's some of the outlying closer islands to Estonia, you can drive across the sea to these islands, and it remains frozen for quite a long time. I have pictures of myself in May, and this is 2003, I believe. In May 2003, I'm standing on the frozen ocean in the Baltic Sea, right outside Tallinn Bay. So it does still happen today, but it's not as it doesn't happen on a regular basis like it used to because of global warming. And global warming is wreaking havoc on the entire ecosphere of this region in general. And talking about this as a source of economy for this region, there is still fishing in the area. There's not a lot of species of fish, but there's a large number of those species, and includes things like salmon and cod, flounder, perch, bream. And what's also interesting is that many of these fish are also freshwater varieties, so they come in from the rivers that leave into the Baltic Sea, and they mix because, again, it is brackish. It doesn't have the same salt content. And pollution, of course, is a major factor against these species today, like not only in the rest of the open sea, but because of this, it's a low-lying sea and not a very deep sea. Pollution is even more of an issue in this area, and the entire Scandinavian region, including Estonia and Latvia and stuff, are doing their best to try and clean up this region as much as possible and prevent future damage to the Baltic Sea. And as I just mentioned this briefly, it is low-lying, and again, if you were to walk, for example, in areas of outside of Tallinn or even Latvia, you could walk possibly for maybe in some areas a half a mile, and it would only be up to your waist. And again, this is a problem in terms of ports and such in certain areas, but the Baltic Sea is blessed to have some great ports near Tallinn and Riga. There's some very major ports of this area, and today both ports receive a large number of not only commercial vehicles, but commercial boats, but also cruise ships. And you'll see if you go to this region, there's a lot of cruise ship travelers who stop at each of these cities, Riga and Tallinn, the capitals of Estonia and Latvia, for the day, and they kind of run around and such. One of the very deep regions in the Baltic Sea is right outside of Tallinn, about 20-30 miles. There's a place called Baltics-Geography Bay, and this in fact was a secret Soviet naval facility, and it had this rare distinction that underneath the shelf of the bay was some deep pockets, almost tunnels underneath the shelf of this particular bay, and they would hide nuclear submarines here, and the U.S. was unable, and NATO was unable to track these subs when they'd go underneath this particular section of Baltics-Geography, and it was a testing facility and such, and they also built submarines there, so they tried to hide what was happening in Baltics-Geography Bay, and it was a closed region even to the people of Estonia for basically 50 years. You had to have military permission to go to that region, and they kept the Estonians away from Baltics-Geography Bay. Today it is a sad reminder of the Soviet era. There was a lot of military kind of housing there at one time, Soviet housing, and restaurants and such, and most of that was abandoned, and these Soviet structures today are in disrepair, and there's talk that NATO might invest in this particular region, again for the same reason that the Soviets did, and maybe one day it'll see a revitalization. In terms of the Baltic Sea, historically of its importance, really comes to light in the medieval time periods of its participation in what was called the Hanseatic League. The Hanseatic League was a union of German-controlled, or in this case, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but Livonian-controlled cities along the Baltic Sea. And this included Tallinn, which at that time was called Reval, Riga, Königsberg, which today is Kaliningrad, and a very important city we'll talk about, Hamburg, an area, part of Lithuania today, Klaipėda, also the city of Gdańsk, which is in Poland today. At the time period it was called Danzig, and also Lübeck. And this was a trading bloc of the Middle Ages, where they controlled shipping and weights and measurements and such in this area. It's kind of like a mini EU of the medieval time, and had a very strong control. And what was important to this area was the export of amber, especially, and the amber trade goes all the way back to Roman times. Also flax, linen, rye, furs, timber, and it was there's a lot of exchange of textiles for these products from the Baltic Sea. So that's my first discussion of this geography, just the Baltic Sea in general, and then I'll continue on in the next section.